Hello, folks. Hey, this is Tim at lovechangegrow.com, and this week's post and video is about suicide and violence. First off, let me start off with a disclaimer. This is general information, it's not advice, consultation, treatment, or recommendations. So if you are in need, please contact your local community professionals, crisis services, law enforcement for help, consultations, and services. There you go. So I've done another post, but it was in reference with a job interview. So take a quick look at that. I had this interview many years ago, and the question was, you have 5 suicidal persons in the ER, one who is intoxicated, one who is severely depressed, another that's been in the ER 3 times this past week with suicidal thoughts, one is another is acutely psychotic, and the other one, last one, has a lot on their plate, a lot of stressors of relationships, finances, and what have you. Anyway, the question is, using the mental status exam, tell us which is which, what are the general treatment recommendations, and why and when would you detain them? It's a heck of a question to figure out. But it's a great question, and so that's where I'd like to start this week, is just to think about that question as we move along. The other thing is, these are basically thoughts from my experience as a crisis mental health evaluator and consultant. These are ways that I have kind of conceptualized the suicide and violence kind of cases in my experience. So then, first off, let me say that both suicidal thoughts and thoughts of violence are normal. We all have them. We all get ourselves in situations where we're either just severely upset and angry or enraged at times over something. And same with suicidal thoughts. I think most reasonable people will admit there are times in life when you just go, oh my gosh, just kill me now. I want this to stop. And so the difference is in mental health, when I get involved, it's gone beyond the mere thoughts. It's gone into potential plans, behaviors, or attempts. So that is the difference. It's fine to have thoughts and feelings. It's a whole nother matter when you get into actual behaviors such as threats, such as attempts, and things like that. So let's see. Let's just jump right into this. So, a large part of this whole presentation today and in this post, think of things as spectrums. It's not either or. It's not one or the other. But between those 2 points, you have a whole spectrum, okay? If you've been following me, you know that this is a common theme. So a lot of times folks think and are taught, and we kind of conceptualize things as either or. But when you stop and think about it, everything, it can be lined out on a spectrum. So types of violence, you can think of, violence we usually think of as directed towards somebody else. But if we think about violence directed to oneself, then that becomes suicide or self-harm. And so I think that's one way that's to look at suicide, is a violence towards oneself. And in the mental health crisis consult, civil commitment, detainment, it has to be as a result of a mental disorder. We all get, pissed off at ourselves because we've done something dumb or we should have been paying attention and stuff. So it's not that. It's a level beyond that. So generally, you have your standard thing of violence directed at another person. So in mental health, it's danger to others, danger to property, kind of things. Um, but then when it becomes danger to oneself, that's suicide, self-harming, and also when a person is inadvertently or because they're not understanding the situation or the ramifications of what's going on, they become a danger to themselves, not by sense of commission or actively trying to hurt themselves, but because they're not able to recognize the situation. And in that, I think in the ITA part 2, we jumped into the whole discussion of grave disability. And so there is the whole idea here that at times when we're rather disorganized or reactive to things that are going on either inside of us or stressors out in the world coming down and just oppressing us or really pushing in and cornering us, we react to those external stressors or those internal state of maybe a person's paranoid, and so they are reacting to things going on their head. And so the key thing is the client's perception, a person's perception, and how that relates to their experience. And experience is a person's experience. As we all know, our experience can seemingly be our view of ourselves, the view of the world, view of the future is a simple way to think of experience. And then with grave disability, or there's another term which is called diminished capacity, and diminished capacity is a legal term, but it's in mental health. The civil side of that is severe deterioration in one's routine functioning and their ability to have cognitive and volitional or willful control. So when a person is has this kind of grave disability or diminished capacity, well, then oftentimes it's because of drugs or alcohol. It may be a person is delirious from some kind of medical processes, such as a drug interaction or medication interaction, or infected states such as sepsis or a urinary tract infection in an older person. So, but there's also things such as maybe a developmental disability or somebody being on the Asperger's or autistic spectrum, so they may not have what quote normal people have, the cognitive volitional control. They may not quite understand what is happening, and so that this area called grave disability or diminished capacity is kind of this other rule out category where oftentimes folks don't think about this as a danger to self because it's not active. It's more of a passive sins of omission kind of thing. So I will cover that a bit more. Again, then there's the whole idea, as you know, of is the why is really the clinical formulation. Why is this happening? Is it situationally driven because the person is going through bankruptcy, a divorce, homelessness, things like that, and that's not as a result of a mental disorder. It's a result of their perceptions of what their situation is. Now, one can argue that has mental effects, and indeed, stress is a huge factor. But then you have the secondary question is, what's the appropriate treatment? And is inpatient psychiatric hospital the appropriate treatment? Well, here's how sometimes I've done this when I'm doing evaluations, and I'll say, well, if I was your fairy godmother and had a magic wand and could go ding, and you were a sweepstakes lotto winner, would you have this situation? And could you change the situation? Well, yeah, I'd pay off my debts. I'd, continue through the divorce and find some other partner or spouse, and it would be happy. And so then that's, if that's kind of the scenario, then, inpatient psychiatric treatment is not the treatment to go for. The treatment would be winning the lotto kind of thing. Now, I know this sounds kind of crass and flippant, but that it's a way to generally think about things as far as situationally driven. Then there's the internal, external perceptions, and it's really about subjective experience. How is a person viewing, what's going on? How do they view themselves? Do they feel empowered, or are they desperate and hopeless? And that, or it's how we interpret the world. And like I said, a great place to ask that question is, how do you think about yourself? How do you think about the world? Is it oppressive, or is it like a great place? It's a big adventure. I'm happy, I'm excited, kind of thing. And then the view of the future. If a person's depressed, the view of the future is not only oppressive, but like doom. It's like, why the hell am I here? Kind of thing. So then the other, kind of why is in cases such as a developmental disability, or even a teenager, or a adolescent, or even younger, a child, just doesn't have the capacity to understand the situation, understand how to plan, how to take responsibility, and how to make things happen. So in that, sometimes folks are quite intelligent, just as because of their childhood experiences and things that have happened, they have developed a maladaptive coping skill, a skill that doesn't really serve them well. And so that's where you see things such as what we call parasuicidal or learned behavior. Hold on a second. And so in those cases, a person, wants attention, wants to get things done for themselves, but they go about it in a kind of this way that they've learned to gain attention. So, or that's one way to do it, and that's sort of a relationship way. And then you see folks that are cutters and burners, and do the self-harming behavior. It's not that they want to die, but it's a way for them to kind of like, oh, I ground myself by cutting, or I don't know what else to do. But when I cut, there's the theory of the endorphin kind of thing. This when a person cuts, they have this different kind of response that they figured out, that it sort of takes their focus off of perhaps feeling bad about themselves. It causes pain. It can kind of ground a person, and it kind of brings them back into this other awareness. So they're sort of become aware of, oh, here I am. Okay, I gotta figure this out, kind of thing. But it's become a learned maladaptive way to kind of cope. And then we talked about a bit of the diminished capacity, whether a person's has some dementia or some developmental disability. So one way to look at what we try to figure out is really asking what are the risk factors, both in the negative risk factors, meaning they don't support health and wellness, but you also got to look at those risk factors again on a spectrum. On one hand, you have the negative ones, which aren't going to be helpful generally and adaptive, and you have the positive risk factors, which support wellness, support health, and support living life well. So generally, you can look at this as four types of risk factors. You have the static or historical risk factors, which is basically history and what the person has experienced so far. A lot of times that can be in childhood, and it's also age, race, gender, whether they were raised in kind of a chaotic childhood, or childhood with a lot of criminality, or were they raised in a supportive, well-functioning family environment. And you can look at the parenting sections blog post, and that'll give you some idea of, giving children and understanding their early childhood development, and their environment has a big influence. So that was the static. Here's the dynamic piece is you can kind of think of dynamic as personality, of, their psychological makeup. How do they view the world? Are they generally positive, or are they generally depressive or avoidant, or, do they look at themselves as a victim, and the world is an oppressive kind of place? And it also is like, what are their coping skills? And this goes back to the maladaptive coping skills, or inadequate, underdeveloped, or not yet developed coping skills kind of thing. And so, that takes account for some of how old they are, what is their maturity level, developmental level, and things like that. So that's kind of a moving, ongoing, but bigger picture kind of thing. And then actually, when the ITA officers, and we're looking at things, we're really focusing down on the last two, which is the contextual risk factors. What is it in the environment that supports a person, or is contributing to their crisis and chaos? And that can be things like access to drugs or weapons. And we ask people about what are they thinking, and their intent and plans, and access to things that they might suicide or self-harm with. And so that's getting a feel for that. And then the fluid risk factor is really what's happening in the present. Why is this happening today? And that's where we really rely a lot on the mental status exam, which I think I outlined in ITA Part 2. But the fluid thing is really kind of also, again, I talked about eminence, and that getting into that 24 or 48 hour window, either prior or in the future of when a person is having that evaluation for detainment and commitment. And that's sort of, we're looking at, how are they thinking? Things like, what are their thoughts? Are their thoughts a wish, or a fantasy, or an imagination? Geez, I wish I was dead, and that's just, in some ways, they don't want to hurt themselves. They just have the fantasy is like, man, I wish this was done, But then when you add feelings, it's like, well, how do you feel? Are you enraged? Are you just pissed off? Are you disappointed and desperate, and hopeless? And each one of these thoughts and feelings kind of thing can also be measured on a spectrum. How intense is it? Or is it not very intense, and it's kind of just a passing, fleeting moment? Or is the person they've been feeling this way for a week, and the feelings have intensified or become more acute and more concerning. So that's the feelings. And then there's things like the intention. Well, what is their intention or motivation? Is this a reactive kind of thing, or is this like a focused, like they're just focused on this. They're obsessed. I want to die. I want to die. How do I figure out how to die? Okay, I'm figuring out plans. I'm making, gathering resources and stuff to make that happen. And then those gathering of resources and stuff are behaviors. Okay, well, you can have thoughts, you can have feelings of being really pissed off and disappointed, and once you start moving into intentions and then behaviors to make something happen, that those are the things that we're looking at in the mental status exam, and where the fluid things become more of we start to give that much more weight than just the old history. Now a person may have a depressive history, and that's okay, but now they're starting to act on it. They're starting to make plans. They're focused on their intention. And so that contextual piece and fluid risk factors are just bringing it more together, really ratcheting up the concern. So I think that does it for the static, dynamic, contextual, and fluid risk factors. Years ago, I came across this book by Malloy. I think in 1988 is when it was published, but it was called The Psychopathic Mind. And Malloy was a forensic psychologist, I believe, and sort of focused on, well, let me do this first. Okay, so before we jump into Malloy and his actual model, we have the house cat example. You got Cuddles, the cat, a lovely little cat who is also a mouser. And here's the situation. So Cuddles is in the garden shed one day and just hanging out, taking a nap in there and stuff. And all of a sudden, this strange big dog comes up and shadows the doorway to the garden shed and starts barking. And Cuddles go, "Wow, what's going on?" And raises its hair, hunches up, and if that dog gets anywhere close to Cuddles, Cuddles is just enraged, fighting for dear life, okay? Scratching, whatever. And so that's an affective or disorganized response of Cuddles, that for some reason, this big dog, this big fear, the stressors are just freaking Cuddles out, okay? And so, if the dog moved away, that means, okay, Cuddles can cool down and go, okay, I'm going back to my nap. And so those are examples of being defensive. A rapid displacement of a target is just like anything that gets near Cuddles, it's going to get scratched or bitten at that time when Cuddles is just like freaked out. But once the big dog leaves, so it's only limited to when the dog is around, okay, or when the fear is there. You can see Cuddles is in distress by the fur on his back, by his bushy tail, by his wide eyes, and things like that. It's primarily an emotional or affective response. And the awareness is like kind of like hyper vigilant, just looking around. Where's this big dog? Where is it going? What's happening? Kind of thing. And so it's also contextual and fluid, because of the situation of the big dog. It's like boom, and it kind of because of that kind of loses cognitive and volitional, or it's cool, it's like, man, I gotta pay attention. So it's just all about protecting myself, or going, what the hell is happening? Now, on the other side, you have Cuddles can also be in predatory mode. So Cuddles is also a great mouser, and your little house cat Cuddles likes, hey, I'm gonna go out hunting today. I want to go play with a mouse, catch a mouse and bring it home to the doorstep and all that. And so that's a predatory mode. It's aggressive. It's focused in on a target, so it's not displaced. It's like focused in. Hey, there's a mouse over there. I'm going to crawl up there really nice and slow, sneak up on that mouse. So it has a target. Because Cuddles is in mousing mode, Cuddles wants to find a mouse, and so they're preoccupied with that. They're just focused on that. If it's So he's looking for a mouse. So it's not if a mouse was present. They're looking for a mouse. So that's kind of like they're focused time-wise, attention-wise on that sequence of hunting a mouse. Generally, what they mean by preceded by a private ritual, oftentimes, I guess folks would have this ritual. They would kind of, be obsessed with this target, really study with it. And this is all generally in private. It's not seen by other people. So on TV, you see, and they have the secret room with all the pictures and all this other stuff. They figured out the person's schedule and stuff like this. And then, so they still have focus awareness, but it's really targeted in, and it's like a tunnel vision. I'm really focused in on this potential mouse, that, and you can kind of say, well, Cuddles isn't going to go after a squirrel or a crow because it doesn't fit the victim pool of being a mouse. Cuddles isn't interested in in possums or whatever. Cuddles is interested in mice. So that's the predicted victim pool. And then you can see that their cognitive volitional control is organized, it's intentional, and there's strategic behaviors. Let's see. So you can look at that predatory thing as more like Cuddles is a mouser. That's his dynamic, that's more of a personality. And he's gotten mice before. That's a historical kind of thing. And so when you look at the 4 risk factors, you're seeing the dynamic and the static kind of risk factors, versus when Cuddles is being chased by the big dog, it's more of a contextual, here's the big dog kind of thing. So I think you guys get the idea of the house cat example here. But it's a way that when I came across the psychopathic mind, it like, oh, this makes sense. So what I think I found was valuable is, and part of why I think suicide and violence can kind of be viewed somewhat similar, just as suicide is violence towards oneself, where they are predatory towards themselves in a way. Now, this is just my thought. It'd be interesting to research and read some more and find out some more about that. And I would certainly encourage folks to do that. But for me, it was a interesting and useful model for my work as an ITA officer. So I think, you have this idea of self-predation, the person basically, trying to off themselves. And so, you have, a lot of times in the whole suicide picture, it's like on one hand, when a person just seemingly is disorganized and they're suicidal, they just go, oh, I'm just going to kill myself now. And then they, it's like more of an impulsive kind of thing versus folks that do actually commit suicide. There are a group or a subsection of folks that are very predatory to themselves. You don't hear about it. You don't know the person's, suicidal until they're dead. They just, planned this out, made it happen, and boom, perhaps there are some signs, but it's usually not to the level of concern and awareness by the community or by close friends or even family and things like that. It's just like, and sometimes I've seen this in a few cases where, let's say a couple, usually long term, they've been married for, decades. And when the one spouse dies, the other spouse, the surviving spouse, is like, man, I'm out of here. I can't live without my my partner, and we were one and the same kind of thing. And so in those kind of cases, it can be, certainly a high risk because of loss, because of this internal kind of perception is I can't live without her, kind of thing. And my life has been centered as being part of this person of, we've been one and the same, and then half of myself is gone. What now? Why am I here? I've lost my meaning and purpose and stuff. And if folks are pretty well together and have been basically successful and organized and all that, you may miss those kind of signs that a person is really struggling. And oftentimes, in those cases, in like the predatory kind of thing, it's a private kind of experience where it's like, I'm not going to say anything. Yeah, I miss my wife, but and they're not going to talk about it. And at some point, the news is, hey, so and so killed themselves in some manner. So to round back to the clinical formulation is again the situational driven. Is the person's experiences and perceptions, are they private and internal, or is this kind of for lack of a better word, external kind of thing where you can see the shit show going on, it's going to happen, versus the private internal kind of thing. No reason to go and review the maladaptive coping skills or inadequate thing. Diminished capacity, you sort of already know that. And so in some ways, out of the clinical formulation, you have themes. And this goes back to the original question here, the interview question. It's like, that question was really designed around clinical formulation and treatment recommendations. So, like the first theme here I got listed is the situational kind of stressors of perhaps homelessness, food, shelter, divorce, bankruptcy, loss of job, that kind of stuff. And the whole thing there is, how do we support and get a person in front of or involved with participating with somebody, a therapist oftentimes, or a counselor, of, hey, okay, your situation has changed. How can we help you develop the skills to navigate that situation? And certainly sometimes folks will get some medications, and that can or cannot be helpful. It might, oftentimes the idea is, hey, let's get you on these medications. And the medications really aren't designed to make you happy. They're designed to give you the energy and kind of make it so that you can start to engage and participate in things that make you happy, or getting you moved towards the more on the wellness spectrum, on the wellness routine. And number two, learned behavior, and really oftentimes that is driven by anxiety or stress, tension release, kind of maladaptive coping skills of cutting or burning, things like that. And also, things like, drugs and alcohol can be like, geez, I gotta figure this out. So yeah, then things are going way overboard. I'm just gonna knock back a couple, shots and stuff like that, and that certainly reduces the stress in the short term. It's just like using an anti-anxiety in a way. It's like it takes the edge off. But the problem is, once the edge is off, a lot of times folks kind of go, oh, okay, I feel better. But they don't take the next step of going, what do I need to do to make my situation better? So they get into this kind of routine of, okay, I'm feeling anxious, I'm taking some medications or going out and drinking for a bit, and I feel better. Okay, great. But then the next day they wake up and they're still in the same situation. They go, oh my gosh, I gotta go to work, but then I'm going drinking, kind of thing. And so that gets to be, kind of the ugly little cycle going on. And so in this kind of learned behavior, avoidant behavior, managing stress and tension release kind of thing, is getting in there, working with a counselor, developing better coping skills on maybe decision making, mate selection, communication, what went wrong, or what could have gone better so you didn't lose your job, those kind of things. So it's really, in the personality disordered, it's the dialectical behavioral therapy kind of skills of emotional modulation, managing anxieties, and taking inventory of that and figuring out better ways to do that than drinking or running away and kind of avoidant behavior kind of thing. So with severe depression and acute depression, so you have a significant disruption in sleep, energy, appetite. The treatment thing there is antidepressant medications and getting a person stabilized so they're not going to fall further into the hole, ideally. And so medications put a bottom into it. But then the whole thing then is, okay, we got to work with the kind of cognitive, mental, and emotional kind of things in a wellness package, developing a better wellness routine where you're eating well, sleeping well, doing your passions, a group of friends that are supportive, keeping yourself curious, learning new things, really being able to pursue your meaning and your purpose kind of things, and taking care of your spiritual needs. So there's the depression, we used to call it endogenous or internal, kind of referencing a biochemical imbalance kind of thing. And medications can certainly help with that, but also exercise and getting out, taking walks, seeing people, hanging out with friends. So, the studies show that, doing a wellness plan along with the medications is much more effective than just the medications. And certainly medications can help, be an adjunct or be the put in the bottom of the depression so the person doesn't drop down. But by far it's well known in research. Yeah, you want to do the wellness stuff, you want to get the cognitive and emotional regulation or modulation skills, getting a wellness routine kind of thing like that. And a person, once the concept is, hey, if you have a great wellness routine, things are going to go well. So even though the medications has put this bottom in, well, then the wellness routine and getting out, taking walks and doing your thing is going to raise you up off that bottom. And so you're going to be living your life well up in this area. And, when you start to go down, well, then if you're going down and hitting this bottom, well, then we're looking at, well, what is it? Does it need to be a medication adjustment, or maybe because of our own, liver functioning, kidney functioning, all kinds of things in the medical um, model kind of stuff is maybe, your body changes, and your body and your functioning of your organs, liver, kidneys, your neurotransmitters change too. So it's more like, okay, let's if a person, here's a way to look at it. Generally, a person may have a history of depression, of severe depression, and they're living their life well, and they're continuing to do so, but they're still getting depressed. Well, we're going to look at that from a physiological, biochemical, neurotransmitter kind of thing, because the person already has a good wellness routine. So then we're going to get the person in and look at what can we do from a neurotransmitter kind of medication kind of thing. And there's all kinds of really cool stuff happening that's always being developed. And so, if that's the kind of thing, sometimes if a person's severely depressed, they've hit bottom and dropping down, they can't pull themselves out, then let's get them into the hospital, get a medication evaluation. So I think you got that. Then you also have the sort of psychotic or bizarre kind of thing, where it's not really suicidal per se, but it's like the person, like, you have the kind of thing where is like they have the squirrels are telling them that they got to chop off their arm, or because the chipmunks are saying, well, you don't need to take your diabetic medication because it's poison. The chipmunks are really the little angels and saying, hey, this is what's really going on. Don't take your medications. They're trying to kill you, kind of thing. And that's sort of the psychotic, bizarre kind of thing. When a person's having those, you usually, the folks that are oftentimes schizophrenic or have a schizophrenic condition and acute, or sometimes you'll see that in a bipolar disorder, where bipolar is you have your normal range here, you're within normal limits, and bipolar means two poles. You have the manic pole and you have the depressed pole, and instead of hovering here in the middle, fluctuating up and down, people go way up and way down. That's the two poles, the manic pole and the depressed pole. Or you can have the depressive pole only, and people don't go up into the mania, and that's unipolar depression. Anyway, sometimes in the bipolar disorder, you see folks going way up here into the mania or way down into the depressive piece, and at those extreme ranges a person becomes psychotic. And so then that can also be a stabilization on mood stabilizers and things like that, and that's a good reason for a person to be in the hospital to do that, either because of a schizophrenic kind of presentation or bipolar presentation at the extreme kind of levels. Then you also have, the next one is drugs and alcohol. So we know that drugs and alcohol generally aren't a great way to manage a person's life. It often evolves around trying to treat themselves because of a trauma background or childhood. It can be also, alcohol is famously known for when people are intoxicated, in a state of intoxication, they feel depressed, they feel crappy, they feel like a piece of crap. It's like, oh my gosh, why should I be here, and all that. And so oftentimes a person will come into the ER with a blood alcohol level fairly significant of a 2.0 or something like that. And there are they're depressed, they're suicidal, they want to kill themselves, and because of that intoxicated state, they're kind of in a disorganized state, a reactive disorganized from their own internal perception of their experience. But as a person sobers up and drops down to a 0.5, 0.5, they're more, becoming sober. And so sometimes a lot of folks go, no, I wasn't suicidal. Why would I want to kill myself? I want to go drink some more, kind of thing. And it's so there's that kind of suicidal kind of presentation. Or a person is homeless, they're on the streets, and they're doing methamphetamine because what else is there to do but to entertain yourself? Wow, meth is cheap. It's cheaper than alcohol. I might as well start doing meth. And so the whole thing with the drug and alcohol thing is the treatment for intoxication and abuse, drug and alcohol abuse, isn't psychiatric treatment. The treatment is don't stop drinking, stop doing meth, stop taking drugs. Now, the problem with that is a lot of times because of the trauma history and all the stressors is when the person is detoxed, i.e. no longer intoxicated, and then further, they're trying to dry out for longer. So generally, detox can be anywhere from a few hours to a week or so. We can pretty much detox people pretty quickly, relatively. But when a person's no longer under the influence, then their deficiencies of their coping skills start to emerge. All this crap from their past emerges, and so you have also a co-founding or comorbid, meaning there's also this mental health piece that once you take the blanket of alcohol or drugs off, then you have this trauma kind of based mental health issues that don't rise, but you uncover them, and it's like, oh no, now what are we going to do? And so that, you can look at that as, well, in drug and alcohol recovery is you have the detox, you have the drinking phase or the abuse phase where they become intoxicated, you have the intoxicated phase, and then you have the detoxed phase where a person is now clean and sober. But in this clean and sober phase, because of their inadequate or maladaptive, underdeveloped coping and living skills, their wellness routine is not existent or isn't great. Well, that wellness routine takes a while. And we know that for the most part, you can get people fairly detoxed and cleaned up and looking well. And at, 3 months, 6 months, really they're working on the routine and establishing a new life, a new sense of themselves, a new sense of the world, and their future. And that whole process can take, at best, 18 months, 2 years, to really establish a good wellness routine. And that's where the outpatient piece, the clean and sober living piece, and developing a new life, basically making a new life, new friends, not hanging out with your old drug abusing, drinking buddies, trying to figure out what are your passions, what are your goals, getting a better diet, sleep, and all that, getting exercise, finding your meaning and passion, meaning and purpose kind of stuff is not an overnight thing. It's not a weekly kind of thing that transforms magically or in a rapid manner. So there's that piece. And then number 6 was the geriatric sort of dementia, delirious, traumatic brain injuries or head injuries, developmental disabilities kind of thing. And so a lot of times when I evaluate those folks, a lot of the underlying thing is either they're they have physical pain, maybe some emotional frustration. They generally don't have great coping skills, or those coping skills because of dementia have decreased. And so, you know, it's again there, it's not necessarily psychiatric hospitalization, but it's like, well, what can we surround in the environment in this person's life that support them, supports their independence as well as possible. And that could be like a group living situation, and or assisted living care, living, nursing home, dementia care unit kind of things. And so when those cases come to land in a person's lap, then it's really the opportunity to either start, or let's talk about what are the supports in a person's life. And sometimes I've been, a person comes in and it's like, oh, geez, the client has been living in a supported living environment, and today they just went wild and started, assaulting people, throwing furniture and stuff. And then the person comes in, say they're DD, they come into the ER, and they're like, oh, they're actually engaging, pleasant, not too irritable and stuff like that. And that's a change in an environment. And so then the whole evaluation becomes much more of a consultation of, hey, let's pull together, let's talk about this case. In a case of a geriatric or a dementia kind of thing, elderly person, okay, they've been living in their home for the past 65, 70 years and doing fine. But now, because of the dementia, they're going to need some in-home care, maybe some 24/7 care, and so it's about talking with the family, getting them hooked up with a geriatric specialist, social worker, to start trying to see how they can evaluate and bring in services to help, mom or dad who aren't doing well in their home or would like to stay in their home, or, so what services can be brought into the home, or are they at a point where the family needs to decide, how are we going to get mom or dad into a more supportive environment kind of thing. So those are sort of the 6 general themes, and it's really based on the clinical formulation of why is this happening, and then what is the appropriate intervention. So a lot of times when I've mentored younger professionals or folks just getting in the human services or mental health kind of thing, they don't quite understand what the clinical formulation is and how we need to evaluate those quote risk or things happening both internally within a person and externally in their environment. And then the second question, which is the defining question, is what the heck are we going to do about it, and what is the appropriate intervention? And so even though a person may come in as suicidal, the piece to ask is, why is this happening, and what is the best course that is going to support the person and the appropriate treatment. So there's that. And wellness has a lot to do with it. In ITA Part 3, the odds and ends, I gave some notes kind of thing on how to look at and question various things. Here I have physical energy, social interaction, emotions, intellectual, meaning and purpose, and spiritual. So that is basically the wellness kind of routine. And you'll see people that perhaps are severely disabled, such as they're a quadriplegic from a motor vehicle accident. So, those kind of things is they're probably in pain. they probably have all this medical kind of thing that they got to attend to. They may not sleep very well because, they're, caregivers are in there turning them every 2 hours and things. They feel because of their quadriplegic or paraplegic condition, they're socially and interactional wise, relationship wise, isolated. And so they, have a poor self-image and they go, God, I can't be useful to anybody. I used to be a school teacher and loved working with kids, and now I'm stuck in my freaking home and all I got for entertainment is the damn TV, and so in cases, I go, well, are there volunteer opportunities? Is there some way or somebody you can hook up with that's in a worse condition than you are, and so even though, say, a person's a paraplegic, maybe they can, do some literacy volunteering, helping people to learn how to read and things like that. Or, folks that are severely traumatized, they don't trust people and stuff like that. But maybe, working at an animal shelter or animal rescue kind of thing, or being a temporary, rescue home might be a great option for a person to go, yeah, okay, I have some meaning and purpose. I got to get up. I got to go do this stuff. I got to go to the store and get cat food. And so those are ways to think about how to, formulate a wellness routine, a wellness structure, a wellness environment, so the person feels like, hey, I have some self-worth, I have some value to another person or an animal, or I can contribute some way. And the world, may be pretty darn crappy, but I've figured out my little piece of the world where it's not so crappy. And thus, I have a reason for waking up tomorrow morning. I have things I got to do to take care of this damn cat or my dog and things. So you can look at, here's the hamster wheel. The hamster wheel is basically, the whole idea is the dynamic of the hamster wheel is that it spins around, okay? It cycles. There's peaks and valleys. There's an energy to it. And you can look at suicide as a tension release kind of profile, in that at the bottom of the cycle is we're doing okay, and then various stressors start to ramp up, and at the top of the cycle is where the suicide thing, the whole stress and the whole experience of the self is that, oh God, this is terrible. And then that's where a person is probably at most at risk for suicide, because they're stuck there. And then if they move on past this, then by the grace of God, perhaps they've had a suicide attempt and they've survived, and now that pressure is off. And so then the pressure decreases until they're down at the bottom. And then it starts to cycle back up, the stress, the tension, the self-doubt and stuff, back up to there. And so you can look at this hamster wheel, this cycle of building tension, releasing, building tension, releasing. So the problem is people run on this hamster wheel and they're sick and tired of being on this frickin' hamster wheel. And they go, oh my gosh. And so the problem is they can't think of anything to do but run around in this hamster wheel. And at some point they think, I'm getting off of this damn thing. But they don't know how to get off, except for the idea of killing themselves. And it's not that they want to kill themselves. They want the pain to stop. They want the craziness to stop. They want the social isolation to stop. They want the desperation or the the poor self-worth, feeling like a piece of crap, to stop. And so this is where, I think suicide assessment can really be, which is a tool. You go in and assess the risk. Okay, that's what you're doing. And you're looking at these various risk factors. But then, how you can also go beyond just the suicide risk factors and doing that suicide assessment as a tool. But the suicide risk assessment can also be a tool of intervention. And when you kind of understand, what's going on, this repeating cycle, they're basically trying to do the same damn thing but expect different results. Well, is there a place where you can help a person interrupt that cycle and help them to jump off that hamster wheel without the thought of doing it via suicide? And so at the top of the cycle, where they are generally in crisis, and by the grace of God, they haven't killed themselves yet, then that can be an opening. And that's where, in this whole intervention, you're looking at the contextual and the fluid risk factors there surrounding that moment in time, or that small 24, 48-hour window. And here's the thing, is when the person is at that apex or at the top of that, that's where the death wish is focused. And the thing about the death wish is when the person, that small period of time is really pretty small, when they're going to pull the trigger or, chug a fifth of alcohol and take a bottle of pills. That's a really short period of time, and that focus on that death wish is really intense. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of focus to do that. So they're basically in this cognitive tunnel. All they can see is this tunnel of, I'm out of here, I'm out of here, I'm out of here. Am I ready to pull the trigger? Okay, I took one pill. I got the other, pouring the bottle in the other end. I'm holding the pills. That's a very short period of time. In my estimation, it lasts maybe 20 minutes. And at the outside, maybe an hour and a half, because it takes a lot of psychic energy and focus to say, am I doing this now? So, you can think of this as, here's a person wanting to jump off the hamster wheel. But for them to jump off the hamster wheel, they need another wheel to jump onto. And jumping onto that, well, if they don't know what they're jumping onto, or can't conceive of or picture or conceptualize, what's this other wheel? What do I jump to? So that in the intervention, suicide assessment as an intervention tool is like, okay, we're going to have, here's where you're at. It sucks, and here's where you want to go. So how do we get you from here to there? Now, from this point is what I call, I talk about this in the empathic witnessing piece, and I'll link that here in the post. And that's where, the professionals say, okay, we're doing this sacred space kind of empathic witnessing and listening to the person, listening to their story, which is in a way an assessment. You're figuring out, you're listening to what is their plan, what is their motivation, what is their stressors, why are they feeling suicidal, why are they thinking about suicide as an option, kind of thing. And you can literally click off, check off those risk factors. Are they there? How significant and how acute is this situation? And so in that post, the empathic witnessing post, I talk about, it's creating a space where basically the person is, their world is broken and they feel broke down. And it's where this breakdown piece happens. And in that little apex there, you have the opportunity and the space to intervene and open that up. So they're breaking down, which really means they're breaking open on the other hand. And in that breaking open, then you can help them to move from breaking down to breaking open to breaking through. And the breaking through is, okay, you're presenting, here's a choice. You can choose this other model, choose to start doing your passions, choose a wellness routine, and choose to do another thing besides kill yourself and move towards a life, a routine, a daily structure where you start to feel empowered, start to find meaning and purpose, and therefore experience some hope. And one of the major factors is how hopeful are you? What is your level of hope? And if it's minus 30, it's like, oh my gosh, we got something to deal with here. So I think that's one of the key pieces of, making conceptually the thing from getting off the hamster wheel of hell to the hamster wheel of wellness. And it's a breakdown, breaking open, and breakthrough process. But to break through, you have to, say, hey, here's a different structure. Here's a different life. Can you imagine this life as, following your passions, your joys, your dreams, instead of getting chased all over hell by your fears, your demons, and anxieties? Okay, I think you guys all get that, and I've been hammering on this for quite a while. So I also want to leave you with this whole idea of when you get people who are parents, and I like to frame this for folks, and say, look, if you commit suicide, you're establishing a precedence where for a few generations, and the research kind of points towards 5 generations where you're setting up a precedence that because you have checked out your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren go, oh, dear old dad, dear old grandpa, dear old great-grandpa checked out because things were so terrible, and said, okay. And so that sets a precedence that it's okay, or potentially okay, to check out when life gets really tough. And so, and there's ramifications for that, for children, for families, and for friends and stuff like that. It's like, oh my gosh, this is shocking. But it's like, geez, they checked out. I guess, if they didn't, I guess I can. But yet, I point out, if you can also choose a different precedence, is that no matter how bad it gets, no matter even if you've tried suicide, at some point you decide, no, it's no longer an option, and that just sets a different precedence. And families tell stories. There's family history and family legacy. And I really lean hard into this for parents who have kids, regardless of their age, who are thinking about suicide or feeling suicidal. It's like, hey, do you really want to establish this legacy for your family of suicide, or do you want to establish a different legacy for generations of your family? And so that's about, I talk a little bit about that and lean pretty hard on that. And here's the thing is, irregardless of the clinical formulations or the themes, if a person's so cognitively constricted and I can't break them open to start to think about, oh, here's other ramifications, here's other possibilities. Oh yeah, I've done this in my past and made it through, and generally in my life, oh yeah, I remember. I've succeeded more in my life than I've failed, or I've succeeded in these horrific, situations, and yeah, I've kind of scratched out a different existence, but that's what I try to lead people to remember those, and that those are gifts to give to your future generations, your future legacy kind of things. And here's the other piece. I had this mentor basically tell me, look, people can smell bullshit from 10 miles away. And so, I often, I leave this little thing, I'll just tell you about it. You can read it for yourself. It's there for your reference. And at some point I say, look, here's the deal. It's your choice. Ultimately, it's your choice, your responsibility of whether you want to kill yourself or not. And I go further and say, look, I'm not Superman. I'm not your angel. I can't be with you 24/7 to prevent you from killing yourself. And if I said I could do that, I'd be more crazy, grandiose, and delusional than you are. And oftentimes I'll get a chuckle about that. And you would know if I told you that I was full of bullshit, that I was a terrible crisis professional, a terrible therapist, because, up until then, you can say, look, you're lying, dude. So I just posed the question to folks. I say, look, if you want to, some help looking at various options, getting access to some help and support, I can do that. I can't prevent you from killing yourself because there's tons of ways to kill a person. I killed yourself, and there's really realistically no way to prevent in the environment eliminating all the things that could potentially be used to kill yourself. That's craziness there too. So I basically ask, so if you don't want to kill yourself, great, I can help you with that. So what do you want to do? By far, most of the time, I folks go, geez, yeah, I got to figure out something. What do you recommend, or what can help me with this situation? So, and if a person can't move off this tunnel focus and they're breaking down, but if they can't break open, then I'm looking at psychiatric hospitalization, either voluntarily or involuntarily. So I think that should kind of do it here for this looking at suicide. And I think for me, again, the twist in that was looking at violence directed to oneself is to me just go, oh yeah, okay, the house cat thing, I got it, So, I would say for folks, families, community members, whatever, professionals, look for those kind of things in a risk assessment. You know what to look for, and if you feel like you're capable, or the person needs to get into somebody, to see somebody to help them break open and break through, do that. There's a lot of great people out there, therapists, clergy, sometimes friends. We all get by with a little help and the kindness of friends and strangers and family. Okay, thanks. Have a great week. See you next week.